Couch
playwright
Clipper.
Ian Hislop. Good morning, sir.
Ah, good morning. That's a very, very kind intro.
They're just facts, Ian. They're just facts. And when you've done as much as you have done, as well as you've done it, that is the embarrassment that an intro leads to on your behalf.
I'm just glad I wasn't on the sports quiz earlier, where I may well have answered no questions at all.
it was the Peacock stately home connection which really got me on that one. That was very well worked out by John Murray.
Yes, well, I mean that might be something I knew slightly more about. I have seen them trying to flutter. I mean, then it's not terribly flying, is it? They're not a graceful bird. But
No,
anyway,
they're not.
enough. I won't quibble.
Enough of this. So playwright, the autobiography of a cad. Tell us a little bit about this. I know it's an adaptation. When were you drawn to this project? When did you decide you wanted to get this on stage?
Well, I write with my friend Nick Newman, and this is a book that was came out in the 1930s. Just an incredibly funny satirical book, and you have this view of the past where everyone's very sensible and very sober and they accept what's going on. And then you see a book like this written in the 30s. It's about British politics, and it's just so dark and so funny. And it's about an appalling man who goes to Eton and then to Oxford and then joins the Conservative Party. So it's all very dated. Obviously, no interest to anyone anymore.
Who behaves his personal life is a mess, and he treats people with disdain. Where work? Who could that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, I don't know if anyone's going to be very interested, but
No.
so we've adapted this, and we've done sort of three or four plays. We did a play about Spike Milligan, which toured nationally, and one about Wipers Times about the First World War. And we always start in Newbury because it's a sort of brilliant little theatre that sort of allows you to try and get it right. But let's hope it's got a life after that. But anyway, I mean, the great thing about adapting other people's books is you just put all their jokes in. And his jokes are particularly fine. So it's a period piece, but it's genuinely funny. And it's a bit like Alan Bastard, if you remember him,
I
or
do.
any of those really appalling characters that shouldn't be funny, but are. Uh, um,
So obviously, I have a very young, hip listenership that follows me, Ian. For
yes.
for the millennials who I'm down with, what is a cad?
A cad, it was a period term for someone who is a rotter, someone who is that's another hit term that you'll have to pick up. It was used to describe at the time people who were absolute sort of SH1Ts, one might say, if one was being very, very rude nowadays. And the great thing about this book is it's the main character is incredibly scornful about anyone who didn't go to Eton, anyone who served in the First World War, anyone who was a liberal or on that side of politics. And the author was all those things. He had a great record in the First World War, tried to be a Liberal MP, worked for the League of Nations. He was a genuinely good man, and he's written a book about someone who was just dreadful.
With this impenetrable confidence that they can do whatever they want with no consequences.
Absolutely. And also just make it up afterwards. So whatever anyone says about them, they say that's not true. And then they present a series of narratives which are the opposite. I mean,
Again. Let's have a let's put
let's
that
have
out
a
to
really hard
let's
think about
put
who
a
might be
list.
doing this.
So are we saying that fake news may have been invented in the 1930s or even before?
Um, yes, and it may well have been invented in about the 1630s. So
Yeah.
one of the things I always try and do is just point out how long in Britain we've been doing this sort of comedy and how important and how funny and sensible it is to have a sense of humor about our own public life. And it's not just us doing it. I think we tend to patronize the past a lot and say it was in black and white and everyone was a bit dim. But actually, when you go and have a good look, it's but why. I mean, I've done with Nick these plays about Spike Milligan, and we did one about a man called Hone called Trial by Laughter. And we, I suppose, we just try and remember these people. Wipers Times, one of the funniest magazines ever printed, a real magazine in the First World War. Half their jokes, I mean, we just nicked. For other magazines that come later. So it's an exercise in celebrating how well the stuff was done in the past and reminding everyone that these things are still true about Britain, and it's quite good to have a look at how they did it then.
And I love the fact that the editor of Private Eye is now happily and feels legally free to say that I've stolen these jokes from dead people that can't sue us. This is good news.
It's all out of copyright, which is another very strong recommendation.
Oh, very good. Ian is with us. Lots of messages coming in, lots of questions for you, Ian. We're going to be talking a little bit more about an autobiography of a cad, a bit of I Got News for You, Private Eye, all the good stuff after the news for Ian Hislop. Ian, I believe not only are you doing the play at the Watermill, but you actually have an evening with yourself and Nick Newman as well. When is that coming up, and what can the audiences expect?
Well, that's a sort of Q&A. We're doing one, and we may do another one. This is our chance to get on stage because obviously it's very annoying the actors getting all
Yes.
the credit. So so we're allowed to go on and answer questions from the audience. And actually, these things are absolutely extraordinary. We did a question and answer about Spike Milligan's play, and his daughter was in the audience,
No
and
way.
she'd seen the play. So we got her to come up on stage. So people ask the most brilliant things. They tend to show that they know more about the subject than you do, which is slightly nerve-wracking. But you just pick up a great amount of stuff. So we are doing a question and answer, and in February. I think it is on the. Let me just get this right.
I believe that is on Wednesday, the
26th.
26th of February. There you
You know,
go.
so you get a chance to see Nick Newman and I live, which is obviously incredibly exciting.
Yes.
But
I believe
come and
that's
see the play as
transferring.
well.
I believe that's transferring to the O2. I believe that's
It is for about 3 weeks, I think.
uh, so lots of questions coming in.
Yep.
40 years of Private Eye. Jules wants to know has is being an investigative journalist, has that got harder or easier as a result of social media?
Um, I would say the hard thing now is we used to spend most of our time trying to break stories. We now spend a lot of time just pointing out that stories aren't true. Social media is the most extraordinary source of disinformation. And people have decided that the mainstream media, they don't trust it anymore. And for reasons that are more or less beyond me, they've decided almost any source will do that is better. And
Yes.
they believe things that come from, people who are acting quite malevolently, people who have no morality or responsibility and are just putting stuff out there carelessly or maliciously. So it is harder. The investigative bit, people are good and they outsource and you get stuff. But the stuff people believe that you have to tell them just literally isn't true. That's got worse.
Because one of the lovely moments whenever you're watching If I Get News for You and you've got somebody on and then you've got, they're going into full flow. And there's always just that moment where you turn around and you go, well, that isn't true, is it? Because this actually happened and this happened. And the audience realize that the person has been caught out, and it's a great moment for truth and it's a great moment for entertainment. Is it a case, though, that with social media now, you say, that's not true, and someone just replies, no, no, it is?
Yeah,
And
or they say the important thing is that I believe it or I feel it to be true. It's this
yes,
idea of this is my truth. One of the, I'm again, my family always tell me that I've made a career out of stating the bleeding obvious on television, which is probably true. But it's literally, it gets harder to say to people, well, that literally didn't happen. And there's a very good American commentators talk about Trump and everything American comes over here.
Mm.
It's basically trying to undermine reality. If people believe that there is no longer any such thing as truth or anything that actually is true, then nothing matters anymore.
And
And I think that things do matter, so that becomes a problem for me.
but there's also that thing, isn't it, where in social media people have the same type font. They have the same number of characters. There's also spell check in there now. So, it used to be that idea that there's no graffiti anymore in pub
Yeah,
toilets. Do you notice that? So you used to be able to go into a pub toilet and notice whether, by the spelling or what they've written it in, that whether that could potentially be true or not. But there's a kind of a everybody, be truth, lies, or whatever your opinion is, everybody's in the same type font on social media, and so people
yeah.
go, well, Ian Hislop, his tweet looks like this, and somebody else's tweet looks like that. They look exactly the same.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I don't have any tweets, so
Ah, okay.
you, you won't get confused by that. No, I mean, you do have to work out when someone tells you something. In the old days, if a very boring and unreliable person down the pub told you a story, everybody would say, "Well, you don't listen to anything he says because it's not true. He makes stuff up." If you just expand that with no control at all, the idea that, Facebook or Meta or whatever they call it nowadays has decided to give up fact checkers in order to please Donald Trump. You think, well, where do you go from there? Does nothing matter? So anyway, I feel we have to say things that if people say, well, no one has ever in the mainstream media reported this story, say about the grooming gangs. They say, I mean, it's extraordinary. And 13 years ago, this story broke. It was on the front page of the Times, which is not exactly the most obscure um, uh,
No.
outlet there is. There were inquiries, there were prosecutions, there was a huge amount of national and public debate. And now you're told on social media, everyone's been covering this up. Well, no, they haven't. I mean, really,
It
they
seems
really, really haven't.
it seems to me that's we've got the kind of the social media stage in life where it used to be at school. You used to go, well, my dad says, and then somebody would go in, and there was no way that could be checked. And you go, well, my dad says, and now essentially that's what we've got with facts and the news.
And if you're very rich and you have an organization which has controls a lot of social media, you can get away, or you think you can get away with saying absolutely anything. Um, and you don't have to look at America, but if you look at Trump and you look at what he gets away with saying, literally things that are not true, and nobody seems to mind. So it does become harder.
Peter wants to know what was more fun to work on, Spitting Image or Harry Enfield and Chums?
Well, that's a very good question. Spitting Image was incredibly good fun because I was in my early 20s um, and I hadn't done television before, and suddenly we had this vast sort of uh, mad lunatic program where almost anything could happen with these sort of brilliant puppets. So that was a lot of fun. I mean, working for Harry Enfield, Harry said, and again, I was working with Nick Newman, he said, all my characters are sort of working class and shout a lot. Can you come up with anything? And we said, well, most of the people we were at school were terribly nice, but rather thick, and they worked for their dad's firm. So
Ah,
we gave them a character called Tim Nice but
but
Dim.
Tim, there you go. And the rest is history. Before we let you go, have you recovered from your taxi incident last year? This is, what was this who was after you, Ian? Or,
Well, I mean, again, the my taxi, the windscreen shattered, and the police thought briefly that I might have been shot at, but in fact, just the window exploded. But there was a good moment where the policeman said to me, "Is there anyone who might bear a grudge against you?" So I did have a laugh. Actually, no, I got run over by an e-bike just before Christmas. So
I heard that. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm just thinking that Oxford Street is probably the most dangerous place on earth now, and I've got to avoid it.
I'm just getting this picture here. I'm not on social media. Oxford Street is very dangerous. Come and see my play in the Shires. This is the life that we all want to have, Ian. It's the life we all want to have.
Absolutely.
Look, thanks so much for coming on, dear boy. You can catch Ian's play February the 7th through to Saturday the 22nd of March and the 26th of February for Ian Hislop and Nick Newman before we go to. More power to your elbow, sir. Catch up
Thank you
soon.
very much. Lovely to be on.